Hello, everyone. So I'm Özge Erdemir. Today we will be talking about a really cool topic with you guys, the latest in on-chain analytics and the latest trends. Let me start by introducing myself, and then I'll pass on the word to our guests here. I work at TradingView as growth director. I guess you all know TradingView already. I'm sure many of you are using our platform already. And besides that, I do community building and business development for projects in Turkey. I do advising to projects, actually. So in case you ever need to build a community in Turkey, feel free to reach out. Do you hear my voice very clearly, by the way? Sometimes it feels like cutting. OK, perfect. And at TradingView, we have a lot of cool products like widgets, charts. So if you would like to integrate those products on your platforms, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to help you all. Let me pass on the word to our guests here. We will dive more into the world of analyzing blockchain data, but let's first introduce ourselves and the platforms we are working.
Yep. So hi, everyone. I'm Marcel Buen. I'm an engineering manager at Nansen, as I guess like any good Norwegian would pronounce it. For those of you that haven't heard about us, Nansen is an analytics blockchain platform that basically traders, investors, and crypto-native businesses use to understand what's happening on multiple blockchains. And so I think 3 years ago, more or less, we started with our core offering, which was Nansen Pro, tailored at producing these high-level analytics that allow you kind of like to understand where funds are flowing to and from where exactly and from which specific entities, thanks to our labeled data set of like 250+ million labels. And yeah, and over time we've like developed like on other verticals like Nansen Portfolio to track your portfolio across like 50 different blockchains, and that includes also like stake positions or like derivative positions and so on. And more recently like Nansen Query, which is like our kind of like crypto native businesses on the builder side offering. So yeah, I could go on, but I think I'll just leave it here.
So I'm Miguel. I'm the CEO of Arkham, which is a business focused on de-anonymizing the blockchain. We started the company in 2020 and have been developing our software ever since. It's made up of a couple different components. Number one is the capability for search, to be able to look people and companies up by name and then look at their crypto portfolios. So essentially, you could look somebody up, look up a company, see their sort of total crypto net worth at that time, their balances over time, and every transaction that they've ever made on chain. Additionally, we have the capabilities for visualizations, which is one of our most popular features. I know some other projects also have been working on visualization. And so people use that to, for example, trace funds or look at connections between wallets to understand the relationships between them. And so we launched our beta product back in August. So it's been about 8 months now. We just crossed about 120,000 users. So we've been seeing a significant amount of traction. And additionally, we're looking to make additional moves more into sort of DeFi products and other sort of interesting technologies that people are using within crypto in order to help our users better understand what's going on chain.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nick. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bubble Maps, which is a brand new vision for on-chain data. What we've realized is that traditional analytical tools can be complex and intimidating. And that's why what we're trying to do is gamify on-chain data using interactive and playful visuals. So the tool has been live for about a year and a half, and I think we've managed to change the way people approach on-chain data. And that's why some of the leading blockchains has partnered with us, Arbitrum, Polygon, but of course our beloved Avalanche.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I personally use as well all these platforms, and they all got pretty cool features. I'm going to ask some questions to you, but before that, I want to ask a question to the audience, actually. How many of you are using these platforms here? Please raise your hands. Okay, so you got some customers to onboard here, I see. So perfect day for you to learn more about these products. So let's talk about what are the latest advances on analytics and what's happening recently. Who wants to take on?
I can start. I think probably recently we've seen two, or that we kind of like will see like two major trends, like in terms of like advancements. One of them is moving closer to in real-time analytics. So having in real-time transaction data is kind of, or like relatively like straightforward, but building these analytics on top of that, taking into account like the data scan sizes that like some of these blockchains involve, computing, and then like essentially like generating like these metrics that you at the end of the day like care about, is way more challenging. And even more so if you take into account that like some blockchains also take, I don't know, you see like frequent reorgs, like in the case of Polygon. And so I think we'll see many of these like analytic tools lean towards like using higher performance database systems and also like streaming analytics like in the coming future. So this is something that like at Nansen we've already like started doing, and that our users may have felt like already like in the product, like seeing like live dashboards with in real-time analytics data and so on. And yeah, I think this is something that will roll out like fully in Nansen V2, which should be coming soonish. So yeah, stay tuned. I think the other big main trend is going to be AI. And in this case, it also has like two streams. Like on one hand, you have the data generation. So currently, we have like a really good data set. I would say like probably the best of one of the best within the industry. And we're able to leverage this data like through models that are nowadays available. But like as you know, state of the art, like in AI models, like progresses, we'll be able to leverage like our internal data set even further, allowing us to provide like more value to our users, so making the most out of our proprietary data. So that on one hand. I think like on the other hand, like when it comes to AI, the way that we interrogate data will also change moving forward. So even if you don't have like any technical knowledge and so on, like you'll be able to play around like with data sets that right now need to be set up by I don't know, research analyst or someone like within your team. So I think that's going to change, and I think that's going to be exciting, opening it up for many more people to play with these kind of technologies. And yeah, one last thing, I would say something that we've seen recently that it's been really good is that like finally companies are looking more into like that on-chain data for their own protocols or like for their own, I don't know, blockchains or exchanges and so on. And that's been a trend really good to see recently, how like some of these companies have started to question what are my users doing? Like, do they interact just with me, or do they interact with some other protocol as well? That's like a competitor of mine. Like, are my users located in some time zone mostly, or are they located like somewhere else? And so these are things that you can ask yourself if you're like a protocol founder or like you have an exchange and so on, and that you can find an answer for example, using Nansen query. And yeah, I'll stop here, guys.
So I think the question of advancement is interesting. I think you touched a lot on advancement of technology, which I agree with a lot of the sentiment there in terms of where the technological advancements for on-chain analytics are going. I think to expand beyond the technology, I think that from a market perspective, one of the things that I find very interesting with respect to on-chain analytics, which I think benefits all three of our companies, has been the unbundling of on-chain analytics companies, like at least the older ones, beyond just, let's say, regulatory use cases and government, to actually being in the hands of a ton of regular users, like some of the crowd here. So I think especially in the earlier days, all of the companies that focused on on-chain analysis were mainly using it for a regulatory use case. It was mainly in order to track criminals who were allegedly conducting illegal activity on-chain, which I think also gave a little bit of the on-chain analytics industry a bad rap earlier on, and it gave crypto a bad reputation early on as well, because it sort of promoted this idea that crypto was only used for crime. Now that so much activity has sprung up within the cryptocurrency ecosystem across DeFi, across all of the different protocols that are being built, and people are actually leveraging on-chain information for a variety of different use cases, aside from tracking criminals, including trying to find alpha, for example, or trying to find interesting links for wallets. It's actually moving beyond just the hands of, let's say, law enforcement and intelligence agencies to being in the hands of normal people. And I think that that's actually one of the more important advancements that have come from the space, where it's moving from the hands of a very small, powerful few to being in the hands of everybody. And I think that that trend will actually continue in years to come, where using on-chain analysis will become, hopefully, as popular as companies like TradingView, who popularized looking at price data and technical analysis in order to make decisions and do due diligence and decide what investments you're going to make next. I think that with respect to cryptocurrencies, on-chain analysis is actually more powerful even in some occasions than looking at previous price history and backtesting on price, because it shows you real-time supply and demand information about what's actually going on within an asset. So all of that info moving beyond just governments and very large hedge funds to moving to individual retail traders, I think that's going to be one of the largest advancements that we see within the cryptocurrency industry in years to come as well.
I completely agree with your last point. I think one of the coolest features of on-chain data is that everybody can be their own on-chain investigator. And we've seen this trend on Twitter, where you have a single man army taking country like ZachXBT fighting single-handedly against Lazarus Group, which is a North Korean organization, and you have many of these analysts that are leveraging on-chain data to perform their own investigations. And as you said, in the traditional world, only governments and law enforcement have access to the data and have tools that are powerful enough to leverage this data and fight against frauds. And that has completely changed with crypto. And on a more philosophical level, I think the reason why there's such an explosion for on-chain analytics is because there's never been that much on-chain data. If you take a look at the history of crypto, before 2019, even though Bitcoin and crypto was decentralized, all the action was happening on centralized exchanges. And when you trade or when you stake on a centralized exchange, nothing is actually, or barely anything, is registered on-chain. Everything is happening off-chain. So the data is not public. And starting 2020, because of the meteoric rise of DeFi, the meteoric rise of NFT, suddenly there's a genuine reason and a genuine incentive for people to take their funds away from centralized exchange and started to leverage all the incredible features of DeFi, staking, yield, lending and borrowing, etc. And because of this, because everything on DeFi is on-chain data exploded very naturally. And everything that happened also recently in crypto, so the collapse of FTX, the collapse of Celsius, was a wake-up call for many that actually, yeah, not your key, not your money, so get those funds away from centralized exchange and take your sovereignty back and take those funds away on your own personal wallet. So all of this has created a surge of on-chain data, and as a result, you've had a new generation of analytical tools that I found to be personally amazing. So Nansen has been around for a very long time. You have Arkham, which is absolutely amazing. You have DeFi Llama, which I personally love, and Bubble Maps, who are free tools. And I think giving away this information for free as an analytical tool is actually serving the cause of crypto as a whole and allowing users to really use this incredible data.
And if I may add as well, Etherscan. I think it's an amazing tool out there as well.
Very good insights, and I'm happy to hear that you're also utilizing AI on your tools. And I also agree that these apps are also great to track on-chain demands. But I also think it's not very easy for the average user to analyze the demand directly. So the simpler your apps will get, the easier for the users, the easier it will get for users to understand. So let me ask another question. So using an on-chain analytics tool is a way to recognize wash trading, scams, and actually many more than that. It gives you the opportunity to make smart investments because you see how money moves on-chain. You see where the smart money is going, actually. So how do you think users can utilize their experience more on this, and what other opportunities these platforms can give to users? Or in other words, how can on-chain data potentially help prevent future fraudulent or nefarious activity from happening in the future?
I'm happy to start with this one. So I think generally speaking, as was mentioned in the last question, more and more activity is moving on chain rather than being on a centralized exchange. I think that really helps. Yes, there have been failures with DeFi protocols. I think everybody recognizes that. However, the failures, for the most part, have been parts of actual code bases, right? It happens when code is not working as intended, as it was constructed to be used, and then somebody exploits it basically by making the code do something it wasn't actually intended to do, and everybody can actually analyze that live. When these frauds and these large-scale criminal activities happen within centralized exchanges, it actually takes years to unwind and to actually understand what occurred. In many cases, the fraud actually doesn't occur in a way that's visible and auditable by everyone, but rather occurs like within the institution's books, or between people, or between like contracts or fraudulent loans, things that are all off-chain and then require many years of bankruptcy proceedings, court proceedings, subpoenas, and other kind of like legal mechanisms in order to actually uncover what occurred after the fraud has already been exposed. With DeFi platforms, yes, there have been like rugs or other kinds of problems with code bases, but broadly speaking, it's not a matter of the same kind of problem. It is not that somebody is requiring, trust in a particular individual, and then that individual, goes and conducts illegal activity and then steals all of the money, but rather, at least with some of the largest DeFi protocols, it's mostly just trusting the code base. And you can go in and try to verify that yourself prior to, being able to understand whether or not something is going to go wrong. I think that centralized exchanges are moving more towards trying to build that trust on chain. Obviously, the proof of reserves program has been huge over the past couple of months in terms of bringing transparency to what's actually going on within the centralized exchanges. So I think that that's a very good kind of general direction for the industry to head in. But overall, I still think, ironically, like decentralized finance is a way safer place for people to interact as long as they know how to manage their keys and manage their kind of property overall. But yeah, I think on-chain activity and on-chain analysis will be at the forefront of investigating, like, okay, what platforms actually make the most sense to use from a DeFi perspective without needing to ask anybody for permission to figure out whether or not the funds are there or the code is safe.
To illustrate what has been just said, what happened with FTX and Alameda has been ongoing for months, even years, without nobody even understanding what was happening. And we're talking about billions of dollars of funds moving away from FTX, actually retail funds. So I completely agree with your point. I think the risks are not the same, but at least when it comes to DeFi, it becomes a collaborative effort to make sure that the protocol are safe. And even in the case of hacks, like what happened recently with Euler Finance was super interesting. That was actually a movie, that was a thrilling movie that was happening on chain, because someone managed to steal $200 million worth of DAI in Ethereum and USDC because a vulnerability was exploited within the liquidity pools of Euler Finance. And then, so the hacker had 200 million, and he started to receive messages from users begging him to give the funds back. And I think he got a little bit handsy when he sent 100 Ethereum to Lazarus Group, and suddenly the pressure was on. Like, I think the government got involved and law enforcement starting to put pressure on him. And even also the fact that all these messages and all this activity was happening on chain. So everybody was following the funds, everybody was pressuring the hacker, and eventually something completely unexpected happened. He apologized and he sent all the funds back to Euler with even some extra because the Ethereum price increased in the meantime. So yeah, I think with DeFi being openly transparent and with key opinion leaders like ZachXBT, like even CoffeeZilla, putting pressure on those hackers, I think it's really helping.
Yeah, I think from my side, I completely agree. Having this kind of like transparency on the blockchain allows us to audit like things like this ourselves. I also agree with your point that you made previously. We cannot expect probably everyone to go to this level of detail, like auditing things like manually. And so I think from our perspective, we kind of like reach like a middle ground here where we kind of like try to provide value to our users in a way where like we are able like to flag like some like potential scams like based on on-chain activity already, and tell our users, hey, like this may or may not be a scam. Like we don't know. It's very hard to do that like at scale, but we at least like we can flag it and let you know like this looks suspicious because of A, B, or C. And then that's something that we do like in-house with some models, but also that we do through crowdsourcing through our users and like partnering with other like data providers. I think something that you mentioned was also like wash trading, and this is something that can be like hard to track as well for users. So you see like a lot of like volume like moving like on chain and so on, and you think that a collection may be legit, but it's actually not, and it's just like one single user like wash trading like all the time and so on. So I think it's important for analytic platforms like us also like to take a step forward and try to like not to be opinionated in a way, not saying like this is a scam or this is not, but being able to flag like these things to our users so they don't fall victims of just like rags or like or scams.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it would be great to have more like guiding things for users to understand these in detail, because I mean, we all know crypto and blockchain to some level, but average user doesn't know a lot, and it's still not quite mainstream. So it would be great to have more guiding resources on this on the platforms. So let me actually bring the topic to visualization part. On your platforms, you also have like these maps that can users see the connections between wallets. So what are some of the real life examples people trace the funds?
So on our platform, I mean, there's been a number of different cases that I can think of people trying to analyze wallets. So I keep trying to move away from the criminal examples. I just said that it's super important to move away from that. So I'll give another one. So essentially, one of the main ways people use us to try and track wallets would be actually looking at early insiders of different projects. So you can imagine these new chains or new tokens even that pop up, and there's basically a genesis event, right? So there's the sort of first day that the token has been created, and there's kind of like a big bang explosion of the token where you have a treasury or a mint that has actually created all of the tokens that will come into existence on that day. And then after that, then all of the tokens are then distributed to the insiders. And so the insiders can be a combination of, let's say, founding team, advisors, investors, and other sorts of parties, market makers, and so forth, who are going to be holding the token. And then later on, those tokens will move on to exchanges in order to be sold to retail. So I think one of the key kind of use cases on this is actually analyzing all of those early people who typically will have very large quantities of the token, which if your token is successful, having a large quantity means it's a lot of money. And so very frequently people will go back to that original kind of big bang of all the token holders, label all of them, trying to figure out who the people behind them are. Is this the CEO? Is this somebody who, if news got out that they were selling their token, this is something that could actually move the price and impact my holdings? And then they'll set alerts on those wallets, analyze the activity, try to find other wallets that might also belong to those people in order to analyze them, and then they'll take actions whenever those wallets have any kind of movement. So I think that would be probably one of the main kind of use cases. That and like airdrops. I think like airdrops is probably another really huge example where people are trying to analyze, okay, who got the biggest airdrop? Are there actually some people who received an airdrop, but it turns out all 10 of these wallets are owned by the same person? Oftentimes, it's a lot easier and faster to do that using a visualization tool rather than just like a PDF or a CSV of transactions.
So with Bubble Maps in 1.5 years of existence, we've seen so many unsavory on-chain activities and patterns. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Even some of the biggest protocols are not necessarily completely transparent and clean when it comes to their distribution. So I really like what you said about the Big Bang, because It's also something that we are monitoring very closely, like the Genesis wallets, and how a distribution is evolving from the singular bubble holding 100% of the supply to the mature distribution. And it's the first week is actually pivotal in understanding what's happening, because that's where the VCs gets involved, and that's where the market makers comes in. So if you manage to understand the very few seconds of this Big Bang, I think you have a pretty good understanding and perspective on the whole thing. And my two favorite examples are, one, we managed to find that someone holds 4.15% of the supply of Uniswap. And Uniswap, as you know, is a DEX, but it's also a governance token. So the more you have, the more power you have on the votes. And this person was A16Z, so Anderson Horowitz, and they have, of course, because they have those tokens, they can influence the votes on significant levels. And we talked about this. This was commented a lot in the space, even by CZ. So that was a very big investigation that we performed. And another one that is more in the realm of shitcoins, but I mean, shitcoin are also very big in the space, so it's important. It's about a token called BabyCare that was very popular back then. Everybody was talking about them on Twitter, on CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko. But when we plugged this token on Bubble Maps, we saw that 50 wallets were connected together through BNB transfer. So they were sending each other BNB back and forth, and they were holding cumulatively 25% of the supply. So it's a big chunk of the supply. And 1 week later, all those wallets, they ended up selling at once. They took 500,000 worth of tokens out of the liquidity. They crashed the price down to zero. They deleted their Twitter, classic, and they were never seen again. So this kind of pattern are unfortunately very common occurrence in crypto, especially with shitcoins that are advertised by influencers. So we have a very active community of people who, before investing, they always check the bubble maps to make sure that the distribution is healthy.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you guys. I think us at Nansen, we do wallet visualization, but we use that like as an internal tool. That's not something that we've shipped like as a feature yet. So we've been focusing on other things. But I have to say that I really like visualization, like in your products, guys. Also, I think like Breadcrumbs does like a really good job at visualizing transactions and so on. I completely agree also, like Nicolas, with your points about token distribution. And I think this is something that you can see very clearly like on Nansen. So we specialize like a lot on labeling these kind of like entities. So you can just like go, in our case, like the wallet profiler, apply a token, and see who's holding that distribution. So you'll see who's holding like 10%, 4%, and so on. But also like with names when it comes like to funds and like relevant, I guess, actors. So you could see that A16Z is holding like this much, or this other VC is holding that much. So yeah, similar use cases as well.
Let me just add a personal note. I really enjoy having the real-life use cases on your platform as well. I see some examples there from CoffeeZilla and some other things. It's pretty cool as well. So we don't have much time left. But as a last question, there is a dramatic increase in the regulation across crypto space. So do you believe on-chain analysis will play a role in the future investigations and enforcements? What do you think?
To keep it sure, 100%. Like, there's no doubt. Like, I think this is the key point that like blockchain has, like this sort of like transparency and so on. And this will be leveraged like both ways, right? Like, you may do it like as an individual, but that means that also like governments and like regulatory agencies also have this kind of like power. So 100%, like, it doesn't have to be good or bad. It will depend like on the regulation, I think. But definitely analytics will play a really big role, in my opinion.
I think this is the part where I'm going to say the part you're supposed to say quietly, out loud, and on stage. So the reality is that cryptocurrency and blockchain activity is actually much better and easier to track by the government and by regulators than any other financial system that has ever existed. Right? It's incredibly easy to get access to people's financial information and overall activity on chain than it is to get a subpoena order from a judge in order to get access to their bank records. And so Shortly, yes. Yes, I definitely think once regulators become more clever, they'll realize that, this might be the best thing that's ever happened to them.
Let's make sure that it doesn't turn into a dystopia, though, because
Agreed.
I mean, we're all there for sovereignty, for getting power into our hands, and we don't want this to turn into a gigantic surveillance system where you have those giants, Chainalysis and TRM tracking us down, and especially because when it comes to label, we're labeled way more than we think. It's super easy, like Binance has 80% of the labels, and if you just have 1 degree or 2 connection, you can label a lot of the wallets that are in DeFi. So don't think that crypto is really anonymized.
Thanks, guys. Well, it's a really exciting topic, and we can talk about it for hours, but our time just ended. So thank you very much. Let's have a round of applause for our guests.